practitioners, especially men, of what they call ethical non-monogamy have been socialized away from communication, and they have been socialized away from talking about feelings and that's unethical too.
Welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Esfandiary, and I am bringing you part 2 of my interview with Dr. Wednesday Martin. Today, we're going to be talking about the reality of menopause. Yeah, we're going to shift gears. We're also going to uncover the impact of language on emotions and learning, and why some language we don't even realize we're using in the space of non-monogamy can be harmful and exclusive. So, without further ado, let's go to part 2. Yeah, but I do want to, with our time today, dive a bit more into, what all of this means for us. And we could, talk about the
Yes.
research of primatology and biology, right? But also you've interviewed so many people on their own experiences in
Right.
relationships, without relationships, with infidelity, with being on both ends of infidelity. And I think so. One of the things I found most fascinating in your book and your work is how the science behind the different ways that men and women actually get turned on, and how men have a very straightforward turn on or arousal, and that women have this more like nuanced way
Circular.
of being
Yeah.
circular.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And how like the world that we live in has very much been painted for the container of what a male or the masculine would find sexy. And so it's really hard to measure sex and sexual satisfaction when the scales are different. And
It really
I would love,
is.
I would love to get into that a little bit.
Yeah. So until relatively recently, we had one model of sexual desire, and it was a linear model, and it went from, excuse me, arousal to desire to orgasm in a straight line, and that's called the Masters and Johnson model. But thanks to a woman sex therapist named Rosemary Basson, we learned that desire is more complicated for both men and women than we thought it was, that it's not just a linear process. How did we come up with this huge revolutionary insight about desire? Rosemary Basson had been taught that men were more sexual than women, that men were more easily aroused because they had stronger libidos, and that monogamy was harder for them because they had stronger libidos. And she said, well, this isn't what I'm hearing in my practice. I am hearing women describing arousal and desire, but it's a more circular model than this linear model we've been talking about. Okay, so she said, let's call the linear model spontaneous desire, and let's call the circular model responsive desire. And responsive desire means, well, yeah, maybe you're not really into it, but then somebody touches you just so. And all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I'm really interested now. Or you, see your girlfriend's sunglasses and you're like, oh gosh, I had such a hot time with her. She left her sunglasses. You're like, I really need to masturbate now, right? So that you're responding. The other model was that you felt arousal and then you felt desire and then you were off to the races. Now, when we only measure spontaneous desire, men are up here and women are down here. But Rosemary Basson said, let's start measuring responsive desire. And then Meredith Chivers, one of my favorite sex researchers, developed an instrument for measuring responsive desire. And now we see the male and female libido in humans like this. And as Lisa Diamond, another sex researcher, pointed out to me, some women experience bumps in their desire who are of reproductive age. They experience bumps in desire around ovulation and their period. So sometimes a clit haver's desire might be up here and a penis haver's is down here. Why is it so important to get this information out? I cannot tell you, Jessica, how many women I interviewed who said, wait, there's something, I'm like a guy. I was like, what makes you like a guy? Like, I really love sex. Okay, honey, I have news for you. You're just a normal human woman being a normal human woman. What you're saying is, I feel freaky that the forms of constraint and control all around me can't even stop me. Of course they can't. The software is in there, honey. So it's really important also because so many men have said to me, like, oh my God, I just can't get hard and it's so embarrassing and I'm so ashamed. And women will say, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. My sex drive is so much higher than my girlfriends or my boyfriends, my partners. And then a guy, a penis haver, will say, oh my God, I don't know. I'm just not hard all the time. You can't just like take me down off the shelf and I'm an ever ready fuck bunny and I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, no, no, you're not. Men have feelings, men experience stress. Men feel, vulnerable and scared about sex sometimes. And so it's no wonder that there's a whole range of desire styles and of libido, and it's very changeable. So we're harming everyone when we say, oh yeah, men, they're just randy dogs, they just want to do it all the time, and like women are coy and choosy and reticent. No, no, that is old dumb thing. Stop it now. And Rosemary
Yeah.
Basson helped us understand, what desire really is. Again, we needed more women in sexual science to help us understand the reality, not
Yeah.
just of clit havers, but of penis havers. And there's a great book called Not Always in the Mood, which is one of my favorite books about just leave men alone. They're not always in the mood. Have some compassion for penis havers.
Yeah. I love that. I wrote it down. I've never heard it before.
Yeah, not
Um,
always in the mood. Love it.
there's so much here. There's so like hearing you speak about this, even though these are things that like I've read and I've followed you, just like hearing you talk about it still, it's so empowering as a woman who like, has had a big what I thought like, oh, I have a big sexual appetite. And then to learn that that's normal and also to be reminded that the misinformation that we share is so damaging and disempowering, not just to women, but to everyone on
Right,
this
to
planet.
everyone, right? Everybody suffers when we subscribe to inaccurate, outmoded, dated science and attitudes about sexuality that are not evidence based.
Mm,
And I want to
yeah.
say about you, the bravery to, be real about your libido and about which relationship container works for you. That is an act of bravery, and not everybody can do it. And this is why I hate the term ethical non-monogamy, and I literally never use it. It's just, my background is anthropology. I have to, I look at sexuality as intimately linked to our ecology. So I say female sexuality happens at the intersection of the clitoris and the culture, right? So you and I are very fortunate. We're not more ethical than other people. We're fucking lucky, is what we are. And we live in a culture where we can say, listen, monogamy's not working for me. It doesn't seem like it's working for us. Let's do something about this. And we won't get killed for it.
Right.
Not every woman is so lucky. Many women who said that would be shot in the face. And it's really important
Mhm.
that people who bandy around the term ethical non-monogamy, you guys, come up with another term. You are not more ethical than the woman who would experience violence or even lethal violence for being non-monogamous. You are not more ethical than a woman who uses what we call in anthropology a bridging strategy, where she continues to garner benefits from one relationship while testing out another relationship that might be physically safer, economically better for her, and she has dependent children, and she doesn't have a job because she has a controlling partner or the economy is bad, and she's using a bridging strategy and trying to figure out if she should bridge to another partner. You're not more
Yeah.
ethical. than she is,
I
you're luckier.
I'm
We're lucky we live in Brooklyn and Los
mhm.
Angeles and San Francisco. If you live Austin, if you live in one of these places, spare me your ethical bullshit and have some compassion for people who are not as privileged as you are, and stop calling yourself ethical, because when you do it, you're saying that they're unethical. And I know people are going to say, whatever, come up with better words. Open non-monogamy, disclose non-monogamy. And then for people who aren't doing it, covert non-monogamy. Okay?
Mhm.
Hidden non-monogamy, whatever. Stop calling it ethical and unethical. By the way, I want to say something about people who practice what they call ethical non-monogamy. The number of stories I have heard about people who call themselves ethically non-monogamous, who don't disclose their STI status, or who just are doing it like to build a harem, right? And this is a lot of wealthy men do this. They say they're ethically. Really, you're doing all these retrograde things gender wise, and you're ethical. I don't think you are. You're not disclosing your STI status. I don't think you're ethical. You're not communicating clearly with your partner, which happens a lot in quote ethical unquote non-monogamy. Um, a lot of practitioners, especially men, of what they call ethical non-monogamy have been socialized away from communication, and they have been socialized away from talking about feelings and being, and that's unethical too. If you are not working a rigorous program about yourself, don't call your, and you're subjecting other people to your stuff, and you're not actively, don't call yourself ethical for that reason as well. So I have many reasons why I don't like the term ethical non-monogamy. It makes people very mad. Tough. Come up with better words.
I love it. I'm
The-
Thank you. Preach. Thank you for the lesson in this. It's so interesting because we have a dictionary, and it's like a really adorable dictionary. If you guys don't have it, it's a free download, but
I
it's
want to buy
essentially a
it.
dictionary of terms. No, it's free.
Oh,
But it has stick figures to like demonstrate these terms that, it's like a lot of non-traditional relational terms, right? And in it, I actually wrote like, and maybe I heard this from you or whoever I heard it from first, probably you actually. Um, there's ENM and then CNM, and I write like the use of this term for me also implies that non-monogamy is inherently unethical. And
oh,
so
good
we
point.
shouldn't use that. And consensual is maybe a better one, or whatever you said, go find your own. I
Mm-hmm.
love open monogamy, but you were making me laugh so much. And I just have to say this. It makes me think of the term gold digger, which it boils my blood when I hear people like, especially like men calling a girl a gold digger. And it's like, you literally design the system
Yeah.
where she has no rights or capabilities to take care of herself without the help of a man who can
Yes.
provide. And
Yes.
yet you want to punish her for trying to make sure that her well-being and the safety of her and her children is like intact. So like when you
I
kind of went on
agree.
that rant, I was like, this is how I feel about when people use that term. It's like
Yeah.
we don't know
Beware.
what it's like for women who would lose everything if it got found out that they were cheating on their husband or trying to leave, but they might be in the most unhealthy abusive situation ever, and like it's not on us to decide. And I just love, if you're
Yeah.
using this term, like don't feel attacked, but know that there are better ways to use your language, and language really shapes the way that we feel about
Yes.
ourselves and the world. And so like
Mm-hmm.
put this little lesson in your pocket. I'm really glad that we had it today.
Ah, me too. I want to say one other thing, which, sorry if people don't like this, but deal with it, which is that consensual non monogamy to me is also a problematic term. And I've been talking to Amy Moores, who is the head of the consensual non monogamy task force of the American Psychological Association. And we've been having these
Ooh.
really interesting conversations, which I also have with my friend who's it's Sex Nerd podcast, Dr. Victoria Hartman.
Mm.
And we've been talking about, there are so many instances when what we call consensual non-monogamy isn't consensual. Here's the biggest example that I can think of. Your partner says, is being very honorable and saying, I'm sorry, but monogamy is too hard for me. I can't do it. And you don't want to leave the relationship. And so you agree to it, because, and you're not into it and you're sad about it and it's problematic for you. Is that really
Right.
consensual? Right?
Yeah.
Consent should be enthusiastic. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I
That's such a
question
good
that.
point.
And back to the other thing, my hesitancy around consensual, that term non-monogamy, intersex or dovetails with my concern about the term ethical non-monogamy. Like, sometimes you're having sex with somebody who's being dishonest. Many times I've had people who are, quote, consensually, unquote, non-monogamous tell me that they cheated, they broke the rules, they're not disclosing what they're really doing. Is that ethical, and is your partner consenting to it? So I think it's just easier to say, not in an ideal world, we would just say non-monogamous, and we would not
Yeah.
draw huge distinctions about it. But people need to feel morally superior, and people need to feel that they're different from other people, and people need to set themselves apart. We live in an individualistic culture, so there's that going on. But like you said, words are powerful. So could we just call it overt non-monogamy and covert non-monogamy and just get over ourselves? I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
would
we're gonna
be
make an
helpful.
infographic about this for the episode for sure, because even I'm learning. Like, I really, really love this conversation. I think it's so important. I did not know we were gonna talk about this, and this makes me so happy. That's why I love doing the podcast. It's like there are always these gems. Like, I can have a plan, but then we go somewhere that I'm like, wow,
Wasn't
okay, yes, this
expecting
is so
that.
beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, okay.
I
So
agree.
I want to talk about your current work because I think if you listen to the show, you already know all the things about, non-monogamies and maybe the how-tos and the offerings that we have. And,
Mm,
Wednesday, I think your work and your research, what we covered today is so much more important because people have never had like that before. And you are writing another book. And so I
yes.
wanna I want to talk about that a bit, especially as someone I'm going through a major life change right now.
Mm.
We just found out that we are pregnant, well, via surrogate, but expecting twins.
Ah,
And
wow, that's a lot of big news at the same time. I'm sure
yes,
for you.
yes. It was intentional. We did put in
Yeah.
2 embryos with the hope, but still when it happens, you're like, "Oh shit, this is happening."
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so just for people who might
Congratulations
not.
to you
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, thank you. We chose to have a surrogate because I had a hysterectomy 10 years ago.
Okay,
And around the
got it.
time that I was having that surgery, yeah, sort of had the choice to keep my ovaries because,
Mm.
they hadn't gone in yet. So they weren't sure if it had spread. And like, I feel lucky that, with my surgery, everything was contained to the cervix
Oh,
and got to keep my ovaries. So I didn't go through an early menopause. And then I was able to
okay.
extract eggs and, now we're able
Okay.
to start this family.
Yeah.
But menopause was actually a concern of mine at 28. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is something that I wouldn't have to think about for another 20, who knows, maybe 30 years. But now I'm
Okay.
38. I'm about to have kids and
Wow.
maybe even feeling some early symptoms that my
Yeah.
doctor did say that I might experience because my ovaries don't have their own blood supply. And
Okay.
so I feel like this is like a conversation that I'm not yet realizing how interested I'm going to be in very
Oh,
soon.
wow. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I'm sorry that you went through that. And I'm very inspired about your positive mindset. And I love babies. So I will come hold your babies. Okay.
Thank you. I'm excited about
Um,
that and I appreciate it. I always say like honestly that chapter of my life was the biggest blessing ever. And it
wow.
really has given me everything I have today and I wouldn't change it for the world. So I
Oh,
appreciate it, but also it
wow.
was like a beautiful journey. Yeah.
That's an incredible thing to hear. Thank you for telling me that. I'm very honored to have you share that with me. What so yeah, okay, so you will be in this situation that so many women are now because we delay childbearing. It's a thing that women tend to do when we enter the workforce, and we tend to delay childbearing into our 30s or 40s, some women into their 50s. So what you're going to maybe suggesting that you might experience is you'll be raising kids while going through perimenopause, right? So that'll be it's just so good to have the word perimenopause, to know that mostly women researchers are really trying to move the needle and get more accurate information out into the world about menopause and perimenopause. But yeah, it was interesting that you started having these concerns earlier in your life, and I think it's really going to benefit you. I wanted to say that. So I moved to Los Angeles when I was 55 years old. I'm 57 now. And I really, at the age of 55, moved into an ecology where women are supposed to be fuckable according to straight male standards or dead, right? They're like, just go away.
No in between.
Shut the fuck up. And what I realized is my 50s were very different from what anybody told me they would be. In my 50s, I had a huge career success. On the edge of 50, I had stopped drinking at age 47. I have 10 years of sobriety, but I didn't really start working a program, as we call it, until recently. My husband and I decided to open up our marriage, and we decided to be in a living apart together relationship where I'm in Los Angeles and he's in New York. So I found myself married and dating in Los Angeles, which is an ecology extremely hostile to women my age. And I was having the time of my freaking life. You know, I dated a guy who was 30 when I was 56, and we had so much fun together. I really, because of my program, my Al Anon and AA program, I really started expecting more of friendships. All my work on myself was coming together. My kids, I didn't have to worry about getting pregnant anymore. So sex was purely recreational for me now. My kids had fledged. So I had all this time and space that I hadn't had before when I was in the heavy lifting phase of motherhood. I was suddenly free in ways that I had never been free before. And I was reborn in my 50s, and I was so free. So I'm writing this book called Free Agent. And what I learned in the course of researching Free Agent is that women in our 50s are not who we were told we would be. This experience is not what were taught that was the experience that we were going to have. We're not shriveled and dried up. We're insisting that doctors and medicine take menopause seriously because most of us want to have fulfilling sex lives going into our 60s and beyond. And we're not who we were told we would be. We're not who you think we are, and we're not sorry. And Untrue is a polemic about how, for women especially, being in our 50s, it's a decade of daring and doing. I call it the age of audacity. Women make these incredible decisions. They make the decision for example, it's women in their 50s who most often, if they are sexually fluid, they act on it and they pivot from being with a man for maybe 30 years to being with a woman. It's a time when women are most likely to start their own business, and they're twice as likely to succeed as younger people. It's a decade when women are much more likely to ask for a divorce. It's a decade where women are making these choices that not only affect them, but that are altering the whole social fabric. So I dug into the data. Once I saw, this is what I do a lot in my books. I'm having this experience and I say, well, I feel like a total weirdo, am I? And then I dive into the data. And what I usually discover is that our mating and relating and social strategies and maternal strategies are usually not what we have been taught they should be and must be. And so it was really a revelation and such a delight to realize that my 50s have been my best decade ever. So that's what my new book is about. And it's also about being an anthropologist in Los Angeles, which has some of the most messed up ideas about gender and aging and sexuality that I've ever heard.
Yeah, welcome to the fold over here. I'm about to
Yeah.
leave in a couple of years,
Oh,
but
you
I
are?
I
I
have
love LA, but it is a weird, wild place to study social practices and social and sexual strategies. Wild.
yeah, I bet. I actually wanted to ask you this because I don't know, and I'm sure people are wondering too. In your research, I mean, I know that you've, you know, conducted a lot of interviews on your own. Do you also do like, I'm not a researcher, so I'm going to butcher all this language, but
It's
like
okay.
wide, big surveys, or do you
Yes,
tap into a lot
very
of other
important.
people's
Oh,
research? Okay.
absolutely. I mean, as you probably saw in Untrue, I distilled and synthesized over 250 studies about female sexuality across cultures and species. Primates of Park Avenue did a very deep dive into the evolution of childhood, into women and substance abuse, into like, so there's always a lot of social science in my books, but my job, I am a social scientist and a storyteller. So my job is to go out there and find the science and social science that has life altering implications, particularly for women, and wrap it, put it in a delicious wrapper of storytelling so that it is accessible and so that people can use social science as a tool to improve their lives. Otherwise, the social science is just like sitting there in a vault. And one of the best examples I have of like how social science can literally change your life is this. Now that we know, I'm holding up my little model of the human female clitoris. Now that we know how extensive it is, we know that there are better ways for your partner to perform oral sex on you, right? If you lift one or both of your legs up and they're perpendicular to you, you get a lot more stimulation than you would if your legs are down and their head is between your legs, because now we know the clitoris is extensive. So now
Mhm.
we know the better position to stimulate it. So, right, because we have this science about what the human female clitoris is and how extensive it is, we know how to improve your sex life. Just be perpendicular to the person, the clit haver you're going down on, instead of uh, you know, being parallel or under between that person's legs, right? That is
Yeah.
a huge shift in your pleasure, and it comes from science. But the science was buried for a long time. So my job is to get that science out there so that it can change your life and improve it. And one of my biggest agendas is to help women feel less weird about who they are with science and data. It's one thing if you say to a woman, oh, no, no, honey, it's okay if you want to be non monogamous. That's normal. It's another thing if you back it up with 250 studies in peer reviewed journals, about the social and sexual behavior of non-human primates, about from sexology journals, from medical journals. That's a much more powerful way, at least for me, in my view, to validate women's experiences than to simply tell them, it's okay, you be you. To me, it's very important that when it comes to behaviors that are stigmatized and when we're dealing with a population, women who have been coerced and controlled about their sexuality, and black and brown women even more than white women, it's really important to give them data and say, see, here's the proof that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I feel like
Sure.
that is amazing, an amazing place to put like a little cap on this for now
Yes.
because I know that you'll be back on the show. I feel like there's so many things left, like so many stones left unturned. Um, I guess one last question that I have for you, and thank you so much for sharing all of this with us because I know people are going to benefit so much from this interview because they're just going to start to question everything that they've ever been taught or heard or learned.
That's what your work is about. That's what's so
Mhm.
admirable about what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I did want to know, are you ever going to come back with a podcast? And if not, what can we expect beyond this book? How can we get more of the
Yeah.
incredible work that you do.
Thank you. That's so sweet of you to ask. I've actually been talking to a friend of mine who's also sober about doing a podcast on sex and socializing and sobriety. And so we're in the beginning stages of doing that. And I've been doing some podcasts. I did one podcast with Emily Morris, Sex with Emily,
Mm-hmm.
who has a new book coming out, which is really exciting, called Smarter Sex. And she and I are planning to do more podcasts, including Emily and I are both in our 50s. So we're thinking about doing some podcast episodes about that. So you can look for me there. And I might come back with a podcast myself. And you can always follow me on Instagram. I'm doing a lot more videos on there now. I love Dr. Jana's videos where it's just great to see her talking about sex. So inspired in part
Yeah,
by that. I'm doing more of that now, so people can find me there as well. And of course, they can check out my books. And on Instagram, I'm at Wednesday Martin PhD.
perfect. Thank you again,
Sure.
Dr. Wednesday Martin,
Thank you
ladies
so
and
much,
gents.
Jessica, for having me on. Thank you. I really
Yes.
appreciate it. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I'm so glad. That makes me so happy. There you have it. That is a wrap on Dr. Wednesday Martin. I'm so honored that she came on the show, and I hope you learned as much as I did from her brilliance and her work. As always, please take a moment to rate and review the show. It means so much to me. I love hearing from you. Drop an anonymous question in our Asking for a Friends box on our website, openlatepodcast.com, and I'll see you next week.